stuck with this for years. When it's this important, it should be done properly. It should be done seriously. It should be done with separate pieces of legislation so that we can do our job, so that the legislation will stand the test of time, so that we don't wind up like we did with the Passengers' Bill of Rights, which was bungled, and now there's a whole host of problems and that we were unable to fix. So I hope this government will listen. I hope they'll do the right thing going forward. When we come back, the honourable member will have 5 minutes remaining for questions and comments.
The honourable member for Scarborough North.
Mr. Speaker, this year the Toronto District School Board is marking a 25-year milestone as the largest and one of the most diverse school boards in the country. Since 1998, the TDSB has worked alongside parents and communities to enable children, youth, and lifelong learners to reach high levels of achievement and well-being. With approximately 235,000 students attending 583 schools across Toronto and over 100,000 adult learners, the TDSB is known for its commitment to excellence and equity. As a proud graduate of the TDSB and former trustee and chair of the board, I have witnessed firsthand the role that public education can play in giving every child a chance to succeed. Congratulations to Chair Rachel Chernos-Lynn and the Board of Trustees, Director of Education Colleen Russell-Rollins, teachers, staff, students, and parents on this momentous Silver Jubilee. I wish the TDSB continued success in preparing eager minds for a world of challenges and change. Thank you.
The honourable member for Provencher.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, my riding of Provencher is blessed with 13 Hutterite colonies. In addition to their extensive charitable work, these communities are often on the cutting edge of entrepreneurship and innovation. I want to highlight one such group, the HEART team, led by Paul and Manuel Mandel from the Oak Bluff colony. HEART stands for Hatarian Emergency Aquatic Response Team. They have invested and trained to become Canada's most elite divers and underwater operators for the purpose of recovering drowning victims. Their goal is simple: to help bring healing and closure to grieving families and to give glory to God. As the leaders of the team said in my office the other day, when the fire department or the RCMP call off a search or say that it's too dangerous, that's when you call us. I ask them what happens when the weather gets in the way, and they answer, we pray, and it usually changes. HEART has done recovery operations as far as the west coast of BC and as far north as Nunavut. They even operate under the ice, and they do it all for free. These brave individuals turned a personal family tragedy into a life-changing ministry. They are a credit to their community, to their faith, and to our country. Thank you, HEART.
The honourable member for Halifax West.
Speaker, this week is National Organ and Tissue Donation Awareness Week in Canada. A moment to start critical conversations with our families and communities about the importance of organ donation. It's hard to capture how life-changing and life-saving organ donors can be. We know we need more Canadians to step up as donors, and that means we must have sometimes difficult conversations about choosing to become a donor with our loved ones. In my home province of Nova Scotia, I was proud to be part of government that changed the opt-in donation system to an opt-out model of presumed consent, a North American first. That change was made to increase organ donation and spur diverse communities to reflect upon their relationship with the subject. Today, let's use our platform and encourage all Canadians to become donors. Aider à sauver des vies.
Help save lives. Become an organ donor today.
Who has already donated, you are everyday heroes. Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Drummond. Mr. Speaker, 2023 marks the 50th anniversary of the Duceppe Theatre Company. And while we're celebrating, let's look at some reasons why. This month, the Duceppe Company received the 37th award from the Montreal Arts Council, awarded by the city since 1985 to highlight the contribution of the city's cultural organizations. Another reason to celebrate, the general manager of this theatre company received the Young Manager in Culture Award, presented by the Remy Remy Chair in Arts Management at HEC Montreal. Her name is Amélie Duceppe, herself the granddaughter of the great Jean Duceppe, and she is living proof that not all Duceppes need to be in the spotlight to do exceptional work. In her case, it's to culture that she devotes her talent and commitment. The name she bears comes with the heavy responsibility of honoring one of the greatest theatrical figures in the history of Quebec, and she does so with exceptional brilliance. On behalf of all my colleagues at the Bloc, and especially for those from Lac-Saint-Jean, congratulations, Amélie. The Honourable Member for Glengarry Prescott Russell.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the hard-working egg farmers in my riding and across Canada, I want to congratulate egg farmers of Canada on their 50th anniversary. Canadian egg producers continue to supply us with fresh, local, affordable, and high-quality eggs, despite facing major challenges over the past 3 years, from avian influenza to severe weather to supply chain disruptions. To celebrate the half-century, Egg Farmers of Canada has announced its commitment to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050.
Supporting egg farmers means supporting supply management, first and foremost. This system allows them to get a fair and stable income for their work so they can reinvest with confidence in their farms. Our government has delivered on its commitment to help poultry and egg farmers offset the impact of our trade deals on Canadian poultry and egg farmers. Mr. Speaker,
for their long-standing support of our egg farmers in Canada, and we wish them many more years of success. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Caribou, Prince George.
Mr. Speaker, everyday news reports and social media feeds are filled with stories of yet another violent attack on a first responder or healthcare worker. In our time of need, it's our frontline heroes, our police forces, our nurses, firefighters, paramedics, and other healthcare workers who come to our aid. Without hesitation, these incredible Canadians are there for us, anytime, any place. Sadly, they're facing unprecedented level of violence aimed towards them. This kind of violence has a ripple effect. It contributes to fear, burnout, compassion fatigue, depression, and PTSD. A nurse or healthcare worker shouldn't have to fear for their personal safety when reporting for duty. A paramedic or firefighter shouldn't have to fear for their lives when answering a 911 call. Violence is not part of their job description. Mr. Speaker, next week the debate begins on my private member's bill C-321. This legislation is a first step in curbing the escalating violence against these important heroes. I humbly ask all my parliamentary colleagues to support this important piece of legislation.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Member for Fredericton.
I rise in the House today to honour the life of Angus Hamilton. Mr. Hamilton's life was, in a word, remarkable. Born on April 18, 1922, he bravely served during the Second World War. He signed up and reported for duty at just 19 years of age. He had a dream of becoming a pilot, but his eyesight got in the way. Nevertheless, he found another way to explore the sky by becoming a radar technician with the Royal Canadian Air Force, serving on night fighter squadrons in Northern Ireland and India until the end of the war. His passion and curiosity led him to study engineering physics and receiving his MASc in 1951. It was during that time that he married the love of his life, Margaret, and started his career that led him and his family to my beautiful riding in Fredericton, when he became the chair of the Department of Surveying Engineering at UNB. After his retirement, he pursued yet another adventure. He and Margaret bought a 35-acre apple orchard in Douglas. They learned to grow and sell apples and settled into the community. Mr. Hamilton died at home on April 15th, just 3 days shy of his 101st birthday. I invite all members in this House to celebrate the life of Mr. Hamilton, his tenacity, thoughtfulness, and resiliency. May he rest in peace.
The Honourable Member for Whitby.
Mr. Speaker, as the first astronauts on the moon realized when they looked back on Earth and saw that pale blue dot suspended in the darkness, our planet is precious. Last Saturday was Earth Day, a day when we were all reminded of the majestic beauty of nature, the fragile equilibrium of our complex ecosystems, and the delicate balance of the web of life on Earth. This past Saturday, my family and I were fortunate to participate along with over 40 volunteers in the 3rd annual Great Lakes Waterfront Cleanup. event organized by Dan Combs and members of our local Rotary Club. As we spread out and collected many bags of garbage from the Whitby waterfront at Hayden Shore Conservation Area, we demonstrated our individual and collective responsibility to protect our environment. On behalf of our community, I'd like to say thank you to the Whitby Rotary Club and its members for organizing this year's event, and to the countless dedicated volunteers who came out to help make this year's event a success. It's with community-based initiatives like this that we can raise awareness and inspire generations to care for the one and only place we've ever called home. After all, Mr. Speaker, there is no Planet B.
The honourable member for Niagara Falls.
Mr. Speaker, Canada is powered by tourism. That's the theme of this year's National Tourism Week. In my community of Niagara, some 2,800 tourism-related businesses employ 40,000 residents who rely on tourism for their paychecks. Wow. In 2019, Niagara welcomed more than 13 million visitors, generating $2.4 billion in receipts. We are Canada's largest tourism leisure destination, but Canadian tourism has yet to fully recover. Big Liberal tax hikes like the carbon tax and the escalator clause are hindering our once competitive advantage. Right. More troubling is the fact that while the Prime Minister was vacationing at a $9,000 a night resort in Jamaica, 6 in 10 Canadians are now saying they are scaling back their vacation plans due to higher costs being driven by this Liberal government. This needs to change. A Conservative government will lower Liberal taxes and slash the costs, harming our tourism industry and workers. Mr. Speaker, it's time we create the conditions where our tourism businesses flourish so the world once again knows Canada is a...
For Willowdale.
Go, Ali, go.
Mr. Speaker, on Sunday, April 23rd, many of us in Willowdale gathered to acknowledge a somber occasion. 5 years prior, on a seemingly ordinary sunny Monday, a rental van jumped the Yonge Street sidewalk, violently striking pedestrians. The act claimed the lives of 11 people and injured many more, forever transforming our community. What was first believed to be a tragic accident quickly revealed itself to be deliberate, a heinous crime beyond our ability to fathom. I still recall the confusion and the agonizing sorrow that pierced the heart of Willowdale when the facts emerged. All of us in Willowdale can agree that we owe a great debt of gratitude to first responders. Their heroism on that day was a testament to the highest standards of professionalism. Emergency services aided the wounded with mercy and compassion, while the police apprehended the perpetrator such that justice would ultimately prevail. To the victims and their families, allow me to say that Willowdale remains staunchly behind you. From each victim, a future was stolen, and we continue to cherish their memories. And from that shared grief, all of Willowdale banded together and leaned in to support one another. As we reflect on this somber anniversary, Mr. Speaker, we honor the lives lost and remember that through our common humanity, our community remains resolute and strong. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Good. The honourable member for Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley.
For centuries, at the Passover Seder, Jews around the world say, next year in Jerusalem, to commemorate the aspirations of those held in slavery under the Pharaoh in ancient Egypt. Theodor Herzl, the father of modern-day Zionism, said, if you will it, it is no dream. In 1948, that dream became a reality, and the Jewish people had a state in their ancestral homeland. Today, we celebrate with them Yom Ha'atzmaut, Israel's Independence Day. Canada is proud to have been one of the first countries to formally recognize Israel in 1948. Our two countries have shared 75 years as friends, allies, and close partners. We will continue to oppose efforts to isolate Israel in international fora, and we will continue to stand against any attacks on the values we share. We are united by shared bonds and values that will forever endure. And so, in honor of the statehood in the ancient homeland of the Jewish people, I say, next year in Jerusalem.
The honourable member for Beauce. Mr. Speaker, This government is disrespecting its workers by further bogging down the dispute with the public service. The Prime Minister has once again proven his lack of leadership by allowing more than 155,000 public servants go on strike across the country. The result? Canadians are being held hostage, including on passports. The Minister is asking Canadians to simply not apply for passports during the strike because the envelopes won't be opened at all. Freedom to travel for this government is simply not essential, but the PM has no problem flying to the island of his choice. But my constituents will not even be able to cross the land border for a day trip to the U.S. because they won't have a passport. By prolonging negotiations with the public servants, all of Canada is suffering. A Conservative government would never have allowed the strike to reach this level. We would also be busy catching up on the backlog that this PM and his government have created over the past 8 years. The time has come for a new Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for HoC. Mr. Speaker, today I rise to acknowledge the work of Remy Brousseau. Remy was the Director General of the Denise Pelletier Theatre, a staple in HoC. He was a true artist. Remy worked there for 28 years, and he remained faithful to the theatre's objective of introducing young people to the theatre by giving most of their performances to school audiences. It was under his direction that the theatre's renovation work was completed in order to protect this architecture jewel in Montreal. A few years ago, Mr. Brousseau was awarded the Medal of the National Assembly of Quebec, a well-deserved honor. Remy, thank you for all the hard work you've done. Have a happy retirement, and I wish also great success to the theatre's new director, Ms. Stéphanie Laurent. The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Mr. Speaker, on April 24th, 1915, a Turkish police roundup imprisoned 250 Armenian intellectuals in Constantinople. The next day, 600 were executed. This was the beginning of the first genocide in the 20th century, which took the lives of 1.5 million people. On September 15th, 1915, the Minister of the Interior, Talat Pasha, sent a telegram. The government has decided to destroy all Armenians living in Turkey. Their existence must be brought to an end. However, criminal measures to be taken. Neither age nor sex should be taken into account. Unfortunately, the Turkish regime still denies the existence of this genocide. And just as seriously, Armenians are still being targeted and actions being taken to drive them out of their land. Since December 12th, the only road linking Upper Karabakh to Armenia has been blocked by Azerbaijan. This has left 120,000 Armenians isolated, cut off from the world without food or medicine. A humanitarian crisis is looming, and unfortunately, the international community is looking the other way. Let's stand up for human rights everywhere and now. The Honourable Member for Rivière du Nord. Mr. Speaker, the National Assembly has abolished the oath to the King, and the Quebec government announced yesterday that it would not send a delegation to the coronation of Charles III. Why? Because we don't care about the monarchy, Mr. Speaker. It's a symbol of old-fashioned submission that we don't want anymore in Quebec. And not only in Quebec. A recent Angus Reid poll...
Deep breath.
We almost cannot hear what he's saying, so I know everyone's excited. I understand why. But we'll try to control our excitement somewhat and listen to what the Honourable Member from Rivière du Nord has to say. I would ask him to start again, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The National Assembly has abolished the oath to the King, and the Quebec government announced yesterday it would not send a delegation to the coronation of Charles III. Why? Because we don't care about the monarchy in Quebec, because it's a symbol of old-fashioned submission that we no longer want in Quebec, and not only in Quebec, in fact. Angus Reid poll says that most Canadians don't want Charles III. Most think that the monarchy is outdated, and most agree with the Bloc motion to sever ties with the monarchy. No Charles III on our currency, no God Save the Queen, no oath to the King. It's simple. Most think that this anti-democratic symbol has no place anymore. If the Prime Minister goes to Westminster for the coronation of King Charles III, I think it seems to me that this would be a good opportunity to tell him, between two Queen songs on the piano, that the monarchy no longer has a place here, either in Quebec or in Canada.
Alfred Lloyd-Minster.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The ongoing public service strike is a direct result of the Prime Minister's extraordinary incompetence. The Prime Minister needs to do his job and come to a deal with the workers to bring this labour dispute to an end. He had 2 years to get the job done, but you know what? He couldn't bring it home. Instead, he spent $20 billion more on our bureaucracy, only to deliver poorer services to Canadians and a demoralized public service. Now, with the largest federal public service strike in history, Canadians don't have access to basic and necessity government services. And soon, he will turn to taxpayers to bail him out of his mess once again. Only a Conservative government, Mr. Speaker, will cut back on high-priced consultants that are bloating the costs of government. Conservatives will deliver common-sense leadership that ensures Canadian taxpayers get value for their money.
Yeah! The honourable member for Mississauga, Erin Mills.
Mr. Speaker, today Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen and the crew of Artemis II join us in Ottawa. They are the historic first crewed mission to the moon in half a century. On April 3rd, I joined the awesome Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry at NASA, where I witnessed the dedication and the brilliance of the Canadian Space Agency and astronauts like Jeremy Hansen, who are an inspiration to us all. From touring NASA's Johnson Space Center to taking in a zero-gravity experience at the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory, my appreciation for astronauts has only grown deeper. I am so proud to be part of a government that has supported space exploration to advance the interests of humanity, to invest in research for medicine and for food security. Congratulations to Jeremy, to Christina, to Reed, to Victor, and all of the Artemis crew for your accomplishments and for your service to humanity. Thank you.
I'm not going to quote the standing orders or lecture anybody. Oral questions, question orale. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the cost of the bureaucracy under this Prime Minister is rocketing up by $20 billion. That's $1,300 for every family in Canada. And what did it buy? The biggest federal strike in Canadian history. 150,000 people out on the streets, blocking streets, buildings, and even ports. It cost the Prime Minister $20 billion to cause this strike. How much will it cost him to end it?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, on this side of the table, we continue to believe in the power of working at the bargaining table. Public servants provide important services to Canadians, and we value their work. That's why we're working tirelessly to reach a deal that is fair to public servants and reasonable to taxpayers. That is and has always been our goal. We expect both sides to bargain in good faith and reach an agreement because all Canadians are depending on it.
Hear, hear. Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
But all that he did is increase the cost of bureaucracy by $20 billion a year. So that's $1,300 $300 per Canadian family. That's a 50% increase. And what did that buy Canadians? The biggest federal dream, 150,000 unemployed workers, in fact, who are on strike. They are in the streets. This is a very expensive strike. How much will it cost the Prime Minister to end the strike? The very Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we believe that a deal will be reached with PSAC. Public servants deliver important services to Canadians, and our government appreciates their work. That's why we are working tirelessly to reach an agreement that is fair for public servants and reasonable for taxpayers. That has always been our goal. It will remain our goal. We hope that both parties will negotiate in good faith to reach an agreement because Canadians are counting on it.
Canadians to believe that the guys who paid for his vacation, that he didn't know that they were donors to the Trudeau Foundation. He asked Canadians to believe that he didn't know that Beijing had given $140,000 to the Trudeau Foundation to influence him, even though the donation was processed and signed off on by his own brother. But nothing tops this. He now expects Canadians to believe that he didn't know that the Trudeau Foundation was holding meetings in his office. Does he even know what goes on in his office?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as I've repeated many times in this House and out of it, for about 10 years now, I have had no engagement, direct or indirect, with the Trudeau Foundation.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
No engagement except for Trudeau Foundation donors pay for his vacations. No engagements except for the only two people he will allow to investigate foreign interference are from the Trudeau Foundation. No engagement except for intelligence reports show that Beijing gave $140,000 to the Trudeau Foundation to influence him, a donation facilitated and signed off on by his own brother. And now no engagement except that he hosts them for meetings in his own office. Was there no other office space available anywhere in Ottawa, Mr. Speaker?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, while Conservatives continue to focus on me and attacks on my family, we're going to continue focusing on delivering for Canadians, delivering on affordability, by delivering dental benefits that the Conservatives voted against, investing in health care in ways that Conservatives have stood against, moving forward on affordability by being there to support Canadians from coast to coast to coast with targeted measures that are helping 11 million Canadians, including the grocery rebate. We're also moving forward on creating great jobs for the middle class by investing in a clean, green economy with positive impacts right across the country. This is what we're focused on.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, we all know that nobody focuses more on the Prime Minister than he focuses on himself. He, meanwhile, expects us to believe that this foundation, named after his family, has donors that pay for his vacations, $80,000 in free vacation benefits, that they take donations from Beijing, facilitated by his brother, which intelligence officers say were designed to influence him, and now that he hosts the same foundation with his top officials in his own office. How dumb does he think Canadians are to believe that?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it's interesting the lengths to which the Conservatives will go to not talk about the budget we just delivered for Canadians. A budget focused on three large themes. Investing in affordability for Canadians to be there to support while they're actually struggling through difficult times right now as we build a stronger economy for the future. Being there on health care with historic deal signs with the provinces, with investments in dental care that the Conservatives continue to stand against. We're going to continue building a stronger economy for the future because we know that fighting climate change and investing in the greener economy go hand in hand for the middle class.
The Honourable Leader, the Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, a cultural moment. Do you remember Calimero, a little duckling that went in its shell everywhere and no one ever said anything to him? So he was totally unaware of everything, blissfully unaware. Everything happened without his knowledge. The Prime Minister reminds me of this character. This character who always said it was unfair, that everything was really just too unfair. But now the Prime Minister does know what's going on. The Prime Minister has read the papers. 5 deputy ministers met in his office with the foundation named after his father. So can he really claim to not know what happens in his own office? Before going to the Prime Minister, I would like to remind members that to mock one another is unparliamentary. We shouldn't call each other names. Just a reminder for both sides, for the upcoming questions and also for upcoming answers. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Bloc continues to attack the Trudeau name in every way they can think of. They have been going after my father for a long time. Now they're going after me. While they're busy with that, I'm going to continue doing the work that Quebecers and Canadians elected me to do. I will improve quality of life. I will create a green and clean economy, a strong economy. I will continue this work. And as the party leader knows, I haven't had any direct or indirect ties to the Trudeau Foundation in 10 years. The member for Belleuil-Chambly. This is very worrisome. I don't attack the Prime Minister's father, because the Prime Minister's father did not host the Trudeau Foundation and 5 deputy ministers in the Prime Minister's office and then say he didn't know about it. This Prime Minister knows that the meeting occurred. It takes a lot of authority and knowledge within the Prime Minister's office to host a meeting with 5 deputy ministers. So shouldn't the Prime Minister know what happened during the meeting? And we want to know what occurred during the meeting. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as I've said and as I will continue to repeat, for 10 years now, I've had no direct or indirect ties with the foundation which bears my father's name. On this side of the House, we are working hard on bringing down the cost of life, on making our economy greener. We are investing to get results. We are investing to improve healthcare and investing in dental care. These are our priorities. While the opposition focuses on me, we will focus on Canadians and Quebecers. Federal public service workers have been waiting for 2 years to get a fair contract. After 2 years, nothing. What they're asking for is pretty simple. They want their salaries to keep up with inflation. That's what all workers want. It's clear that the minister is absent and not doing the necessary work. Will the Prime Minister, for once, show some leadership, get involved, in order to break the current impasse? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we all acknowledge how hard public servants have worked with excellence and tirelessly throughout the pandemic in order to deliver the services that Canadians needed. That's why we are with them at the negotiation table, at the bargaining table, to find the best way to move forward. We want to value and acknowledge the excellent work that they do, but we also need to keep taxpayers in mind. We need to make sure that the deal we reach is fair to taxpayers. That's what is going on at the bargaining table, where bargaining agents and unions will continue doing good work.
A good game when it comes to workers, but when it comes down to it, he doesn't actually follow through. In fact, he often says one thing and does an opposite. These are the public sector workers. These are his workers, and the Prime Minister has a responsibility to make sure they have a fair contract. These workers are asking for something very basic. They are fighting a war against inflation, and they want to win. They want to have salaries that keep up with inflation, something that all workers deserve. So will the Prime Minister finally take workers seriously, do his job, and get these workers a fair contract?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I'm now a little bit worried about the Leader of the NDP, Mr. Speaker, in not understanding that the important job we're doing right now is sitting at the bargaining table where deals get made and working on those negotiations. I'm sure he doesn't want to disrespect the important process that happens at the bargaining table, because that's exactly what we are busy supporting. And yes, these negotiations are sometimes difficult, but they're always important, and they're always a fundamental right of workers across this country. country. And that's why we are participating fully, making progress, and we're going to get the right deal for the public service and the right deal for Canadians.
The honourable member for Haldimand Norfolk.
Over the past few days, we have witnessed the largest public service strike in over 40 years, and Canadians are suffering because of this government's incompetence. More than 1,100 students are locked out of school on the Six Nations on the Grand because of this strike. Shameful. Mr. Speaker, education is an essential service. It is unacceptable that children cannot go to school because of this strike, and it's this government that's to blame. What is this Prime Minister going to do to ensure that Indigenous children can go back to school?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday I published an open letter so we can update Canadians and public servants on where we are at the bargaining table. We have been working tirelessly to get from 570 demands to a few that we need to get done, which we are, because we are at the bargaining table, and we will continue to work tirelessly until we get a deal. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For Haldimand Norfolk.
Mr. Speaker, they're not working hard enough because the tax deadline is just a few days away, and Canadians are left without the support that they need to file their taxes because 35,000 CRA employees are on strike. It's the lowest income Canadians that will suffer the most from this strike, Mr. Speaker. Millions of Canadians are suffering because this government's incompetence and their failure to prevent this strike. When will this Prime Minister reverse course, and how much is it going to cost taxpayers to fix the mess that he's created?
L'honorable ministre.
The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, our government knows that work stoppages can be stressful for Canadians who depend on important government services. The Canada Revenue Agency will not change the tax filing deadline because the work stoppage does not prevent Canadians from submitting or filing online or on paper by the deadline. So we encourage all Canadians to submit their taxes, especially we encourage them to do so electronically. And we've had great tax seasons since 2015, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are in desperate need of their tax refunds. But after 8 years of this Liberal government, Canadians are receiving poorer services despite a 50% increase in the bureaucracy. And outside these doors, we have the largest public service strike in the history of Canada. So will the Prime Minister take responsibility for the countless number of Canadians that are counting on their tax refunds and end this strike?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, as I was saying earlier, I published an open letter yesterday to bring an update for public servants and Canadians. And guess what? We are now at a few items to be able to get to a deal. Now, we know many services are being affected right now, and we respect workers to be on strike, and we know that this is hurting Canadians. That is why I am working tirelessly with my negotiating team to get to a deal. And Mr. Speaker, we're going to get to a deal as soon as we can.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Mednapur.
Mr. Speaker, an open letter doesn't cut it. We need a negotiated agreement to end this strike. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister had 2 years to come to a negotiated agreement, and he failed. As a result, we have seniors who are mailing in their tax returns, who don't know when they're going to get their refunds. We have Canadians who are calling the CRA, and no one is picking up the phone to answer the most basic of questions. So will this Prime Minister show some compassion for Canadians who deserve the most basic of services and end this strike?
The Honourable Minister for Families.
Mr. Speaker, unlike the Conservatives, we respect the right to collective bargaining and we respect the right to strike. We also respect Canadians, and that's why, unlike the Conservatives, we brought in the Canada Child Benefit, which has helped lift 450,000 children out of poverty, Mr. Speaker. Unlike the Conservatives, we increased the Guaranteed Income Supplement, which has helped lift thousands of seniors out of poverty, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are going to get a good deal at the negotiating table because that's where they happen. season. Mr. Speaker, we respect Canadians, we respect public servants, and we are going to make sure that we get a good deal for both the public service and Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable député de Lévis.
The honourable member for Lévis-Lobinière. Mr. Speaker, we've had yet another show of the Liberals' incompetence. Public servants are on strike, and the Treasury Board Minister has to deal with this, as well as the Minister of National Revenue. Can the minister guarantee us, Mr. Speaker, that tax refunds owed to Canadians will be paid to them quickly? The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Well, Mr. Speaker, I will not be taking any advice from the Conservatives when it comes to tax season, Mr. Speaker, because this is the best tax season that we've had since 2015, Mr. Speaker. 95% of Canadians are submitting their tax returns electronically, Mr. Speaker. Canadians receive their refunds very quickly when they file electronically, just a few days later. That's excellent, and I would like to thank CRA workers for all their hard work during the pandemic and since the very beginning of tax season. The honourable member for Lévis-Lobinière. Mr. Speaker, the minister's response seems to be something that Pinocchio might say. Careful with your nose. Careful with your nose, Minister. Canadians are very worried, and rightly so. Delays and backlogs with many departments are endless. Mr. Speaker, Liberal incompetence, we've had enough of it. That's enough. When will they finally be responsible and accountable and give Canadians their tax refunds? The Honourable Minister. I'd like to reassure my colleague, Mr. Speaker, that I have no issues with my nose. My nose is just fine, thank you. Meanwhile, we are committed to having a respectful and productive relationship with the public service. We value all employees. Apologies for interrupting, but we do have to stop for a moment because I can barely hear the minister's answer from where I'm sitting. I'll ask everyone to perhaps take a deep breath. Now, we are going to hear the minister's answer because I would like to hear what the minister is saying, so I'll ask the minister to begin her answer again, please. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I was saying, I want to reassure my colleague that my nose is doing just fine. We want to ensure a respectful relationship between our government and the public service of Canada. We're committed to that. We recognize and value the important role that the public service plays in delivering services to Canadians. We will continue to negotiate, and we will not comment on ongoing negotiations, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Trois-Rivières. Mr. Speaker, in the words of Isabelle Haché of La Presse, the Trudeau Foundation is a catalogue of friends of the Liberal Party. A catalogue, Mr. Speaker, that is not subject to the law on political party financing. What a good idea it is, then, for a foreign power to contribute to this catalogue of friends of the Liberal Party while the Liberal Party is in power. And that's exactly what China has done. Why does this government refuse to acknowledge that the Chinese authorities' donation to the Trudeau Foundation could only have been aimed at getting into the Prime Minister's good graces? The Honourable House Leader of the government. I was former executive director for a foundation. For any type of foundation, the rules in Canada are very strict. These rules exist in order to ensure that all foundations are independent and are not influenced. This applies as well to the foundation that the member across the way is attacking. It is a foundation which grants scholarships for students to study. And it is an independent foundation, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Trois-Rivières. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We don't need any lessons from them about independence. The connection between the Liberals and the Trudeau Foundation is so obvious that even former scholarship recipients are now embarrassed to be associated with the foundation. It's obvious when you know that the foundation was invited to a meeting inside the Prime Minister's office. It's obvious when you know that the Prime Minister's office is informed of the donations that the foundation receives. The Prime Minister's reporter on Chinese interference came from the foundation, and everyone knows that it'll be impossible to get to the bottom of the interference with someone that who comes from a foundation that itself benefited from the interference. Everyone understands that except the Liberals. Why don't they understand? The Honourable Minister of Heritage. Well, maybe he'll understand what Chantal Hébert said. They were in the building 3 times. They met with deputy ministers. They never met with the Prime Minister, but Chantal Hébert said that it is very possible that the Prime Minister didn't know that the meeting with the deputy ministers even occurred. So, does the Bloc feel that Chantal Hébert is also part of this conspiracy? The Honourable Member for Laurentides-Labelle. Mr. Speaker, according to La Presse, 30 people have fled the Trudeau Foundation in the last 2 weeks. The newspaper quotes one of them. I feel like I've been burned, they say, because at the end of the day, it's not true that it's nonpartisan. Mr. Speaker, the Trudeau Foundation is a nest of Liberals, which is precisely why China has been trying to get closer to the Foundation since the election of this Liberal government. It is therefore obvious that anyone from the Trudeau Foundation is not fit to investigate Chinese interference. When will there be a public and independent commission of inquiry? The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House. Mr. Speaker, there are rules which protect the independence of all foundations of all types in Canada. These rules are very strict, among the strictest in the world. It is thus unacceptable to attack an independent foundation which has no connection to the Prime Minister. This foundation grants students scholarships. This foundation ensures that the next generation, members of the next generation, will have the funds they need to study and become leaders in our country. It is unacceptable to attack that kind of an independent foundation, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Haut-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, last year, Canadians were lining up to wait for their passports for days. Now, the Minister is asking them, begging them even, to not file for new passport or apply to renew their passport. Never has a G7 country made such a request of its citizens. It's sad and embarrassing. The Prime Minister increased the cost of the public service by 50%, but can't even manage service delivery. Will the Prime Minister acknowledge that this is an emergency and he needs to handle it right now? The Honourable Minister of Families. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's unfortunate that the Conservatives don't, that the other parties don't understand that I said so in order to be honest with Canadians so that they understand what services can be delivered during this strike. It's also unfortunate that Conservatives don't seem to understand that we need to respect the right to strike. We respect workers. We respect public service workers. We respect Canadians too. That's why we are at the bargaining table negotiating with the public service. We will reach a good deal that is good both for public servants and the public. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Grasswood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Even though the public service spending has increased by 53%, we find ourselves in the grips of the biggest federal public service strike in history because of the Prime Minister's epic incompetence. Canadians are being denied the services they pay for and actually deserve. A solution, according to a Liberal cabinet minister yesterday, was, well, don't apply for passports anymore. Can you believe that? Don't apply for passports. When will this government get the job done and restore services for all Canadians?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, unlike the Conservatives, I'm not going to spin the situation for Canadians. I'm actually going to be straight and honest with them because the law dictates what's an essential service, and passports are not considered essential under the law. Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to make things up. I'm going to be straight with Canadians. And when it comes to essential services like CPP, OAS, GIS, employment insurance, social insurance numbers, filing your taxes, these are all services that continue to be provided because they are considered to be essential. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Caribou, Prince George.
Let's be straight with Canadians. It takes a special level of incompetence to spend $21 billion, increased spending of $21 billion on bureaucracy and an additional $22 billion on outside consultants and still end up with the largest federal public service strike in history. Despite all these billions spent, Mr. Speaker, Canadians still have no proposals, no plan, and no passports. How much will the residents of Northern BC have to pay to bring an end to this Prime Minister-caused strike?
The Honourable Minister of Labour.
If we're going to get into the record that members on either side of this House have when it comes to workers' rights, maybe we can talk about it. You know, when I look at certain members in this House who were in government at one point in time, they now profess to be a party that represents workers. They just don't like the part where they may gather together, the collective part, the part where they actually get to bargain for free and fair wages. On this side of the House, ladies and gentlemen, on this side of the House, I will tell you, we believe in that collective bargaining process, Mr. Speaker. We will be there to the end. We will reach a fair and reasonable deal for taxpayers as well.
The Honourable Member for Bruce Grey, Owen Sound.
Trust in this Liberal government continues to erode. We're now a week into the largest general strike in history, impacting the lives of all Canadians. Canadians are concerned about getting their tax returns on time. Afghans that help Canada are still hiding in terror because IRCC is incapable of processing the paperwork. Transport Canada is not conducting marine exams for students. And now, the minister who's presided over the largest backlog of passports in history has the audacity to tell Canadians that their passports aren't essentials and don't even bother applying. Why, after 2 years of negotiating, has this Liberal government failed to solve this dispute? When will Canadians get their passports?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let me tell you what our government is doing for Canadians. Mr. Speaker, a few weeks ago in this House, we tabled a budget which for some reason the Conservatives don't want to talk about. And you know why they don't want to talk about it, Mr. Speaker? Because we balanced fiscal responsibility with compassionate and necessary investments in Canadians. Mr. Speaker, we are providing dental care for Canadians, so you won't be able to tell the size of someone's paycheck by their smile. We are providing a grocery rebate to the Canadians who need it the most, and we are investing in the jobs of the future in a green industrial policy.
Member for Vancouver East.
Immigration backlog and processing delays continue to have a detrimental impact for people who want to reunite with loved ones and those who need to get to safety. As the crisis in Sudan worsens, Canadians with loved ones in Sudan are worried sick about their safety. The Liberals must get a fair deal for the PSAC workers to restore all immigration services. The longer this government drags its feet, the longer loved ones trapped in Sudan will have to wait. Will the Prime Minister step in to prevent the processing backlog from getting even worse at IRCC?
The Honourable Minister for Foreign Affairs.
I would like to reassure this House because my colleague mentioned the fact that people stuck in Sudan are not able to get out of Sudan. And so Canadians right now are being contacted 24/7 because consular services are emergency services. We're there to help them. 550 of them have raised their hands saying they need help. 100 have gotten out of Sudan, and we're on this, and we will make sure that every Canadian is coming back and it's safe.
The honourable member for Winnipeg Centre.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals are going to cut $150 million in funding to women's shelters by September. 600 women's shelters will be impacted across the country. Gender-based violence is on the rise. This is unacceptable. Mr. Speaker, women and diverse gendered folks always seem to be an afterthought for this government. This funding is desperately needed to help those fleeing violence. Will the Prime Minister commit to renewing this life-saving funding, or was his claim to be a feminist government just a farce?
Just a farce. The Honourable Minister for Gender Equality.
Mr. Speaker, far from an afterthought, when the pandemic hit, a $3 million emergency funding top-up was what we provided to make sure that shelters could keep the lights on and keep the doors open. This work continues with the National Action Plan, more than $500 million in the last budget to work with provinces and territories to make sure that the most vulnerable women and girls are safe, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I said that we would have women's backs, and I stand by my words.
The honourable member for Richmond Centre.
Mr. Speaker, our supply chains and trade corridors have experienced challenges due to the pandemic, the impact of climate change, and external events like the Russian illegal invasion of Ukraine. Canada's economy and populations continues to grow, and Canadians deserve to get their goods they need on time. Could the Minister inform this House on how we can increase capacity at our port and strengthening our supply chain for Canadians? Thank you.
Great question. Transport.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my honourable colleague from Richmond Centre for his question and his advocacy. Last week, the Minister of Natural Resources and I announced that it is in our national interest to increase the capacity of the Port of Vancouver by 50% by approving the Roberts Bank Terminal 2 project. The port will have to abide by 370 conditions, and we will continue our work with Indigenous peoples, environmental stakeholders, and unions to ensure the expansion and resilience of our supply chains. Mr. Speaker, we've always said it is our environmental plan that is an economic plan. We are getting the job done, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Edmonton West.
The Beijing communists laundered money into the Trudeau Foundation to gain influence with this Prime Minister. Foundation members who received Beijing's foreign influence cash were then handpicked by the Prime Minister to investigate the foreign interference their foundation facilitated. The PM unbelievably claims he has no ties to the Trudeau Foundation, yet his office hosted a meeting between Foundation leadership and top government bureaucrats. When will the Liberal NDP alliance end the cover-up and call for an independent investigation into foreign investigation, one that is without the taint of the Trudeau Foundation?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, of course, the member would be aware that it wasn't his office; it was the building, and that many things happen in the in his building and in everybody's building. I don't know if he's aware of everything happens in his office building, but these were meetings with public servants that had nothing to do with the Prime Minister. And the thing that I find disturbing is they keep attacking a foundation when we have rules in this country, the strongest in the world, to protect the independence of our charities. And the foundation, the charity they're attacking, their job is to give scholarships to students so that they can be our future leaders. They don't care who or what they attack. Their partisan games continue, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Well, Mr. Speaker, here we go again. It's just a building again, Mr. Speaker. To acquaint the government House Leader, maybe he's never been there, the building is called the Prime Minister's office. It's a 4-story building. Everybody who works in that building is either exempt staff of the Prime Minister or a member of the Prime Minister's own department. It's not like an apartment building where you just rent one space in it and don't know what else goes on. This is the Prime Minister's own office. The Trudeau Foundation met with 5 deputy ministers in the Prime Minister's own office. The Prime Minister is a member of the Trudeau Foundation, and he's trying to cover this up. Why won't he tell the truth?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, it's been made clear, first of all, that he is not a member, an active member at all of the Trudeau Foundation. He has been independent from that for more than 10 years. But what this member continually does, and I don't know how much time he spends on subreddits and 4chan, but instead I think he should spend some time looking at facts, Mr. Speaker. And the facts are that we have some of the strictest rules for charities anywhere in the world. And attacking charities on baseless information and misrepresenting, he knows full well that the building that the Prime Minister in, yes, it has PMO, it also has PCO, and like his building, lots of things happen in different buildings, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député de Mégantic. The honourable member for Mégantic-L'Érable. No one believes the Prime Minister when he claims that there was a wall between him and the Trudeau Foundation. There was a window that was wide open to the Beijing regime, and they obviously see this as an entry to the Prime Minister. They provided a check for $200,000 to the Trudeau Foundation with Beijing's money. Could the Trudeau family explain how they used the Trudeau Foundation to finance the Prime Minister? The Honourable Government House Leader.
In totality, the idea that this government would ever allow itself to be influenced by a foreign power, the idea that that would take place is absolutely ridiculous and offensive. But I would say, Mr. Speaker, let's talk about the walls that protect our institutions. Let's talk about the wall that's supposed to exist to protect our public broadcasters, CBC and Radio Canada, that they want to tear down, that they want to destroy, that they're talking with foreign tech giants about how to get rid of a public broadcaster. Let's talk about the wall that exists between monetary and fiscal policy in this country and what they want to do to the Bank of Canada. If they want to talk about destroying walls, Mr. Speaker, let's talk about what their plans are, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Between CSIS and the government House Leader, I would pick CSIS. So the main goal of the donation was to influence the current Prime Minister. That's what they said in La Presse aujourd'hui. It said the Prime Minister may swear that there's a Chinese wall, but it's not just Beijing that's been raining money down since Trudeau took power. When will he finally admit that he is a Prime Minister who's under the influence of a foreign power because of his association with the Trudeau Foundation? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, it's not a matter of I'm not the one who's answerable here. It's the Canadian law that protects the independence of any old foundation in Canada. Any type of foundation is protected by law. Its independence is protected by law, and it's irresponsible, wholly irresponsible, to attack a foundation that's responsible for student grants and bursaries, and to attack the future leaders of our country, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member for Avignon-la-Métis-Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, according to a UN report released Friday, glacial melting is breaking records and is now irreversible. But for this government, it's not a global tragedy. It's a business opportunity. The latest budget allocates millions of dollars to oil exploration in the Arctic. The unbridled use of oil is the very thing that brought the world to this catastrophic point. And the federal government is saying, now that the ice is melting, there may be money to be made there. When will Canada stop tossing the consequences of the climate crisis to future generations? The Honourable Minister of the Environment. I'd like to thank the member for her question. I'd like to remind her that between 2019 and 2021, GHG emissions went down by more than 50 million tons. There was no pandemic in 2019 and no pandemic in 2021. So we have the best record in the G7 in 2020 and 2021 for reducing GHGs, better than the U.S., than France, than Japan, and even than Germany, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much. The honourable member for Avignon. Mr. Speaker, Let's talk about Canada's record on emissions. In no less than 5 reports released Thursday, Canada's Commissioner of the Environment accuses the government of being all talk, no action. Jerry DeMarco says he's disappointed and frustrated by Ottawa's empty promises to reduce greenhouse gases and protect biodiversity. Is the commissioner the one who's got it wrong in all 5 reports? Or is it the federal government that's the one? Are they the one heading straight for a cliff with policies like Arctic oil exploration? The Honourable Minister. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to remind my colleague that we have a lot of respect for the Environment Commissioner's work. Unfortunately, when it comes to those 5 reports, he didn't have the latest data, which just came out the week after his report. They will certainly be included next year. I'd also like to remind my colleague that in the last budget that the finance minister tabled a few weeks ago, we made record investments in clean and renewable energies, which puts us at the top of the list for all G20 countries when it comes to investing in those areas. Thank you very much.
Alberta families across the income scale will see a net loss of thousands of dollars because this government's punishing carbon tax. So says the latest Parliamentary Budget Officer's report. But the Liberals would like to bury that one and cover it up. The ripple effect on the cost of food from farm to truck to store continues to inflate food prices. Albertans know carbon tax siphons off their hard-earned money and doesn't lower emissions. Will this NDP Liberal government scrap the carbon tax, or will Canadians scrap them?
The Honourable Minister for Families.
Speaker, I know Conservatives don't like to talk about facts, but I'm going to put a few facts on the table. In 2006, when they came into office, Canada ranked 17th in the OECD when it comes to child poverty. By the time they had left office in 2015, Canada ranked 24th in terms of child poverty. It's a little hard, Mr. Speaker, to take them seriously when they talk about poverty. But you know what? Since we came into office in 2015, Canada now ranks 2nd in the OECD when it comes to child poverty. We will take no lessons from the Conservatives. We will continue to act, continue to support Canadians and families. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Regina Leuven.
This Prime Minister is completely out of touch with the pain and suffering his tax increases are causing to Canadians. Gas, taxed. Groceries, taxed. Home heating, taxed. CPP, taxed. Payroll, taxed. Groceries, taxed again, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, while well-connected rich Liberals keep getting further ahead, hardworking Canadians are falling further behind. Simple question, when will the Prime Minister give Canadians, families a break and axe his carbon tax plan?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I find it very interesting that the Conservative member is saying this, and to be honest, it represents the height of hypocrisy, because the platform that he ran on in 2021 says, and I quote, "We recognize that the most efficient ways to reduce our emissions is to use pricing mechanisms." Mr. Speaker, climate change is a challenge that requires action, certainty, and coherence. On this side of the House, our position is clear. We're putting a price on pollution, more money back in people's pockets. When Conservatives have a coherent policy on climate change, maybe they should tell Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Kootenay, Columbia.
Mr. Speaker, rural Canadians are facing real challenges, trying to make ends meet because of the carbon tax. Prices went up again for groceries, fuel, and everyday life. When the truck arrives to deliver groceries, it's now more expensive. And for Gail and Doug and Creston to take the children to a volleyball tournament 320 kilometers away, it's no longer an option. This NDP Liberal government's carbon tax is damaging. When will the government start listening to the common people, Canadians, and remove it?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives continue to talk down the Canadian economy. But I have some good news. Last week, S&P, the ratings agency, published an economic analysis in which they reaffirmed Canada's AAA rating, with a stable outlook. S&P concluded that Canada's AAA credit rating, quote, reflects its strong institutions, credible monetary policy, sound net external position, and wealthy export-oriented economy. Our government is providing dental care, investing in health care, providing grocery rebates, and fiscal responsibility.
For Hamilton Mountain.
Yesterday, we launched the hiring period for Canada Summer Jobs. It's a program that provides employment opportunities for youth from different ages and backgrounds for all over the country so they can learn new skills in the summer. Last year, 62 small businesses and nonprofits in my riding of Hamilton Mountain participated in Canada Summer Jobs. Can the Minister for Women and Gender Equality and Youth please update the House on the importance of the Canada Summer Jobs program for youth across our country?
Honourable Minister for Women and Gender Equality.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member for her advocacy. Now that the hiring season for Canada Summer Jobs is underway, young Canadians between the ages of 15 and 30 right across the country can log on to the Job Bank's website to find quality work experiences for this summer. As part of the Youth Employment and Skills Strategy, CSJ has helped so many young people facing systemic barriers to employment for years. Because, Mr. Speaker, a level playing field is a key to success for everyone. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Bay of Quinte.
Mr. Speaker, every day and everywhere, Liberal friends and donors are finding themselves get ahead when everyday Canadians are falling behind. In 2015, this government promised to lower cell phone bills by 25%, when in reality, cell phone bills have never been higher, and the former industry minister found himself with a cushy corner office job with Rogers, the company that was supposed to be reducing them. The way things are going, the current industry minister is going to find himself with a cushy office job with Volkswagen in a few years' time. Hey! My question to the minister is, Minister, have you seen your cell phone bills reduced by 25%?
Yeah!
I just want to remind the honourable members to place their questions through the chair, not directly to each other. The Honourable Minister for Innovation, I believe you're getting up for an answer.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about a home run for Canada, Mr. Speaker. Just last week, Mr. Speaker, we got the single largest investment in Canada's auto history, $7 billion, Mr. Speaker. This is the first European manufacturer we have attracted in Canada. This is the first car manufacturer in 35 years. And unlike the Conservative, Mr. Speaker, what they did to the community of St. Thomas in 2011, we're investing in workers, we're investing in...
I believe the Honourable Minister was finished, but I had somebody shouting in my ear on my left. I won't mention who he was, but I want to remind everyone that when someone is asking a question or answering it, a little respect would be nice. Is the Honourable Minister finished? He has about 15 seconds left if he wants.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I was reminded when we were doing this great announcement, I think they were saying it's a waste, Mr. Speaker. I can tell you that confident countries invest in their worker, in their industry. We're going to invest in Canada despite their talk.
The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of my constituents needed help and called 911. Oops, what a nasty surprise. The person answering didn't speak French. That's not a very good situation when you're asking for help and they don't understand you. The CRTC has to make sure that all Canadians, including Francophones, have access to 911 services. How can the Prime Minister explain the CRTC's failure to provide security in both official languages? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. I'd like to indicate to the House and the member that that's totally unacceptable. Indeed, all Canadians deserve their telecommunication services, particularly 911, to for the operator to be able to answer in English or French in the both official languages. We're going to look into this matter, but I'd like to remind Canadians watching that it's unacceptable, and we are going to fix the situation.
Central Notre Dame.
Mr. Speaker, the $1 billion crab industry in Newfoundland and Labrador is at a standstill due to poor markets. Traditionally, when the Alaskan crab fishery goes down, Japan buys more crab from Canada. But instead, Japan is buying cheap crab from Russia instead of sanctioning Russia like the U.S. did when the Ukrainian war started. So has the Prime Minister asked our allies in Asia to sanction Russian crab? Yes or no?
The Honourable Minister for Small Business.
Speaker, on this side of the House, we have stood up for Ukrainians against the illegal war by Russia perpetrated on Ukraine. We have initiated sanctions. We have pulled their MFN status. We have raised this issue with Japan, and Japan, too, I would say, has been a strong defender of Ukraine, standing up for and we will continue to stand up for Canadian fishers. Thank you. That's good.
The Honourable Member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges. Mr. Speaker, we live in the most beautiful country in the world, but the risks to our environment have never been greater. Climate change threatens nature, our communities, and our economy. Budget 2023 announces new steps to protect our natural environment, fight climate change, and make Canada more resilient to the threat of extreme weather. Can the Minister of Environment and Climate Change inform this House of one of the key steps being taken to help protect water and biodiversity across the country? The Honourable Minister of the Environment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges for his question and all his advocacy over the past years. In the budget, the Finance Minister announced record investments in protecting the Great Lakes and freshwater all across the country. $730 million, $85 million for the creation of the Canada Water Agency, an independent agency that will protect our freshwater resources all across the country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, Canadian air travelers deserve protections that are easy to navigate and get them the compensation that they deserve. But instead of listening to the experts, this minister seems to be doubling down on a system that's bureaucratic and expensive. One of the most alarming aspects of his new law is a gag order on air passengers. Passengers who aren't happy with the outcome of their complaint process will be prevented from speaking about it. If the minister is so proud of his new process, why is he silencing the people who use it?
Hear, hear, hear. The Honourable Minister of Transportation.
Mr. Speaker, I was proud to share with Canadians the news that our government is taking action to learn from the last summer challenges that we saw in our air sector. Our government is strengthening the protection for our passengers, making sure that airlines are accountable and responsible for fulfilling their obligation to their customers. We are standing up for Canadians. We are working with the sectors. We'll make sure that every passenger gets the service that they deserve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Under the Liberals, the nursing shortage has gotten worse everywhere in the country. A report today says nurses in Ontario are leaving the profession because of inadequate wages and poor working conditions. We're losing them to private for-profit clinics, and patients are suffering. That's why the NDP called on this government to require public funds to go to public health care, but Liberals refused. Our healthcare professionals deserve fair pay and dignity in the workplace, and patients depend on it. Why is this Prime Minister allowing for-profit delivery to cannibalize public health care in Canada?
Yes. Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm obviously very pleased to receive this question. The member knows really well the $200 billion additional dollars that we announced just a few weeks ago in support of provinces and territories, in addition to the normal increase, the normal value of the CHT, in addition to the value of the tax points, but more importantly, to support workers in Canada through the crisis that he correctly identified. And those dollars, Mr. Speaker, are designed to support the public delivery of healthcare services in Canada.
I'm afraid that's all the time we have for question period today. I wish to draw the attention of members to the presence in the gallery of the 4 crew members from NASA's Artemis II mission. Mission Specialist, Canadian Jeremy Hansen, Commander Reed Commander Reed Wiseman, Pilot Victor Glover, Mission Specialist Christina Cook, they are accompanied by former U.S. Senator Bill Nelson, NASA's administrator, and Lisa Campbell, president of the Canadian Space Agency. It being 3:18, pursuant to order made on Thursday, June 23rd, 2022, the House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the motion to concur in the 15th report of the Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration. Convoquez les députés.
Call in the members.
Thank you. The question is as follows. Ms. Kwan, seconded by Ms. Matheson, moved that the 15th report of the Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration, presented on Tuesday, April 18th, 2023, be concurred in. La période.
The 10-minute period for members voting electronically has started. And the House will now proceed to the vote for members participating in person.
All those in favor of the motion will please rise.